Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Gran Turismo 7. So yesterday I released an updated 800pp build for the Toyota Hypercar, the GR010. Obviously a very good car, and once upon a time the king of the Sardinia grind. And today I'm going to kind of keep that Le Mans theme going, with the race still underway currently at the time of this video going up, by reviewing both the Hypercar and the LMP1 car from Toyota. Both of these cars have won Le Mans, so obviously the LMP, the TSO50, won Le Mans and gave Toyota their first ever win at Le Mans after a good few attempts at it over the years. And then obviously we have the Hypercar, which kind of was basically uncontested, again giving Toyota the first Hypercar win at Le Mans in terms of that category. So we're going to review both of them and look at some of the key differences and different characteristics in the cars. So first up we are going to have the TSO50. Now there is a few key differences and I will discuss them as we go through each of the reviews. So as you can see, we've got the TSO50 Hybrid from 2016. This is actually one of two LMP1 Toyotas in the game. I believe it's the TSO20 that we also have, I believe, from 2012. Again, I'm not going to bother with that one. It just didn't win. Obviously, this one did eventually. Obviously, it was mainly uncontested when it did win, I believe. Back in, I think, 2018 was when it took its win, and with Fernando Alonso driving and such. Obviously, again, very much uncontested. I believe Porsche dropped out, Audi had dropped out, so there was no real competition for this car, but it did give Toyota their first ever Le Mans victory. Now this is obviously going to be a different spec to the Le Mans Hypercar, LMP1 being a completely different category of car. I believe Hypercar was basically in there to attract more manufacturers to it, which I guess it has succeeded in doing. Obviously I believe it was kind of cost cutting and all that kind of stuff. Kind of over the years it got very expensive to keep these LMP1 cars going. A lot of the manufacturers wanting to go to different motorsports and explore different avenues, electric cars becoming the mainstream thing. But yeah, again, the Hypercar in that way has succeeded and brought many manufacturers back to Le Mans. So if you go and watch the race that is currently going on right now in 2023, you've got the likes of Ferrari, Toyota, Cadillac are in there, all that kind of stuff. And at the time when this car won, the LMP1, the TSO50, it was pretty much uncontested. Like I said, many of the other big manufacturer backing had basically gone. They'd kind of done what they wanted to do at Le Mans, they'd won it, and Toyota was kind of left alone and pretty much uncontested and easily taking the win. Obviously it was mainly just the two cars that were battling it out, but they did have a curse for many years under the kind of whether it was the sort of early day, the 90s, the late 90s and such, and then even prior to that when they were running very well, when there was other manufacturers racing. I believe there was one year where it completely just broke down a few laps before the end and breaking the hearts of Toyota. Then the 2018 Le Mans kind of came up and they did take the win, and I believe they are the only manufacturer to be winning at Le Mans up until 2023. So at the time of recording, obviously the race has not actually started at this point, and I'm not going to call it that they may actually be knocked off their perch. But if you looked at qualifying, well, Ferrari are looking very racy, but then again the Toyota, well, it's been a car that's kind of had a lot more, I guess, track use, so there is a possibility that Toyota may just come in and kind of keep that top spot. But yeah, the TSO50 in terms of Gran Turismo 7, a fantastic machine. Certainly one of the better looking LMP1 cars in my opinion, whilst I still love the look and kind of feel of the Porsche one that we do have, and even the Audi. There's just something about the Toyota that really does appeal to me, especially when it's got its proper colours on. It looks absolutely fantastic. But how does it go in terms of performance? Now this is a car that I'd not actually jumped into up until kind of after the physics update of GT7. In fact, the only realistic LMP1 car that I'd used was the Porsche one for some of the events. And yeah, I'm pleased to note that the TSO50 still holds up as a very good car, and it's certainly one that you're going to want to check out. Now, funnily enough, this one is a kind of, it has a high PP rating, all that good stuff. It feels very quick, stuck to the floor almost, and it actually costs a lot less than the hypercar. So the hypercar will either cost you 3 million credits if you want to buy it, or if you took part in the TGR Cup that is currently going on, you will get an updated version in terms of its livery for a 2023 livery one for free. So you could either, you know, if you've got the free one, then all good, but you know, in terms of just the group 1 performance, which these kind of all get grouped into, the TSO50 certainly, you know, puts on a better show and costs 2 million credits less. So it's automatically, in terms of those stats, advantage to the TSO50. Obviously, being built to a different spec, it is a different category of machine. However, in terms of Gran Turismo, yeah, it's the same class. So obviously this will be classed as Group 1, the same as the Hypercar. And in all honesty, I would certainly say the TSO50 feels 1,000,000% better. Even after the physics update, it really does feel like it's absolutely on rails. The acceleration of this thing when it first takes off with the hybrid and such is absolutely incredible. Now, it's one thing that I don't really notice when I'm in the Porsche, but for some reason in the Toyota, the sense of speed upon exiting the corners was absolutely insane. It really did kind of shoot you out the corners. The brakes are near perfect. It reacts well to short shifting. It's good on fuel in longer races. In all honesty, this car really doesn't have a downside. If you're talking in terms of outright BOP and all that lot, then the Porsche is still kind of, you know, the king in terms of the LMP1 machines, to be quite honest. But if we're talking with BOP off and just absolutely, you know, a pleasure to drive, the Toyota, for me, with its looks and, you know, the way it feels, is an absolute standout. For 1,000,000 credits, it's an absolute bargain of a machine, and it can be tuned to take part in a lot of races in terms of the money ground. So if you're a single player only guy and you don't want to take it into lobbies, or you don't want to do custom races, you're kind of backed up there as well. So overall, the TSO50 is a fantastic car, but let's have a look how it actually performed. So if we go down here and have a look at our list, as you can see, it's come 5th place overall with a PP rating of 879.83 on the racing mediums, and a time of 5 minutes 47.468, which is 3 seconds off the 2019 Honda Super Formula, which was running soft tyres. So this is an insanely quick car that if it had been matched on compounds from standard, it could have done a lot better. And now let's go over to the GR10 Hybrid, and this is how our first attempt went. Now, this car for me has gone from an absolutely amazing car from standard with the previous physics update to feeling a lot more on edge since that physics update. There's just something about this car when it's not tuned and not kind of set up to your personal preference. Obviously, I cannot go ahead and, you know, kind of tune them for this. I've got to keep them in there kind of how they are at a brand central. Yeah, there's just something that I just cannot get used to with this car. It's a lot more slidey than it used to be. The grip isn't always there upon exiting corners. It just doesn't feel as good as it once did overall. But again, that is mainly due to a more realistic physics, and mainly due to just how the car feels overall. You know, this isn't meant to be as grippy or as rocket-like as the LMP1 cars, the hypercar class. Again, cutting costs. I believe there is less aero on the hypercars as well, so they don't suck down as much. And it certainly is easy to tell once you jump in any of the LMP1 cars and then go over to the hypercar. Obviously, the Toyota being the only one we've currently got within GT7. Hopefully that changes, Polyphony. Take notes. Yeah, you can definitely tell, you know, there's a lot less aero kind of sucking this car down. Overall, though, it still does feel very, very good. It's a different kind of hybrid power unit. So with the LMP1 cars, you get it straight away from braking. So you hit the brakes hard, it'll fill the bar up, and you accelerate and rocket out of corners. Obviously, with this one, it's a more kind of over time progressive hybrid delivery. You get a lot more of it. Obviously, once it depletes, it's much more difficult to build back up. You will still get a slight touch from your brakes and that, but it's never going to be as it was, you know, kind of when you started out the event. And in my honest opinion, that's probably why I prefer the LMP1 cars for longer events, although you're just getting the short bursts of it, and they do feel like they top out at a lot lower top speed. Overall, that kind of hybrid power delivery is much better, especially if you kind of pack racing and stuff. You get a massive launch, it constantly refills on the brakes, and around somewhere like the Nordschleife where we are now, it really does help on corner exits. The only real advantage I kind of noticed was that the hypercar felt much quicker in a straight line, but it was much more sketchy. And obviously it's got a kind of, you know, different way it provides its, you know, hybrid power. It's much more, I guess, prolonged over a longer period of time. So one of the key talking points I mentioned during the LMP1 review was the fact that the hypercar cost 3 million credits compared to 1 million for the TSO50. Now, they do kind of fluctuate in terms of the LMP1 cars. They're not all the same, but in terms of the two cars we are reviewing today, one's 1 million credits and the other is 3 million credits. It also has a lot less performance points in terms of the hypercar, so overall it is rated a lot worse in terms of Gran Turismo's rating system. They both come on the medium compounds of tires. They both have different hybrid, you know, delivery systems. So overall, in terms of what you are paying for compared to what you could get, I would honestly say that the hypercar just isn't worth it over the LMP1 cars these days, where, you know, back in the, you know, when it was kind of the king of Sardinia, this was certainly the better car and the one I would have gone for. It really did stand out, but since the latest physics update and the way the car now feels and the fact that it's just not as powerful as it once was in terms of its Sardinia grind, although okay, it's still very powerful, still a zero stop and stuff, and it can essentially pay for itself, the TSO50 just feels miles better. You know, there is just something about that TSO50 that stands out massively compared to the GR010. And yeah, I honestly I'm sad to say that, yes, this car once was amazing when it first came to the game, and it still is great. But again, if we're talking price points, you can save yourself 2 million credits. Yes, the car gets nerfed a bit more if you're going for the grind, but if you just want overall performance, the LMP1 car is massively going to outshine it. And I feel like the gap is much bigger than it was previously in terms of, you know, overall how the car laps, how it feels and such, and overall performance. I just feel like the LMP1 car has now gone from almost being par with the hypercar, although the hypercar was rated less. Again, you know, over long periods it felt great to drive. It still felt like it was on, you know, absolute rails. But since the latest physics update, the LMP1 cars are kind of like up top, whereas the hypercar just kind of, I guess, went mid-tier. Again, it's just the feeling of this thing. It's a lot more slippy. You'll see it throughout a lot of the clips. Obviously, I showed you the intro clip of my first run. You'll notice that even on the second run, we did manage to keep it going, but we did have a couple of offs as well. And again, the car just doesn't feel as good as the LMP1 car, and it doesn't feel as good as the car used to as well. And I think that's the main downside of this car. It's kind of gone from feeling absolutely fantastic no matter where you took it to just feeling, you know, a little bit kind of meh. Maybe it's me, maybe it's just my driving style, but I'm certainly just not finding the hypercar as good as it once was. Now, do I think there's a bit of a workaround for this? Obviously, the LMP1 cars, we have a group of them. If you wanted to purely just race the LMP1 cars, there's plenty of them to choose from, and you can get some good competition going. However, the hypercar is a newer class of car, and this is the only one we currently have. If Polyphony want to kindly add the other hypercars, this would certainly balance out the hypercar, as we'll actually have competition for it. We'll be able to test the other hypercars up against the, I guess, OG one of Gran Turismo 7, which is this one, the Toyota GR010. And certainly it would kind of maybe then feel a lot better, because it'd feel like it's more in competition, whereas whilst it's the only hypercar, it really sits in its own class and it's difficult to make a proper judgment. So with the hypercar done with its lap, let's see how it ranks up against the TSO50. As you can see, it came across the line with a 5 minutes 54.240. A couple of offs, maybe, you know, giving away a couple of seconds there. So I'd say ideal time would be around about a 51. However, that still makes it slower. I think mainly where it's made up the time is actually in this straight line over the TSO50. Through the corners though, that TSO50 is absolutely unbeatable by the hypercar. So there we have it. Both the Toyota LeMans winners have been reviewed. Dropping into that TSO50 for the first time after the physics update, it feels absolutely fantastic, to be quite honest. Whilst, okay, maybe it's not as, I guess, on rails as it once was, it's still very as much on rails. You know, the physics update obviously giving the cars a lot more feeling in comparison, and it feels absolutely fantastic. I cannot fault the TSO50. For 1 million credits, I would certainly say go ahead, pick that car up. It's an absolute blast. I know a lot of people kind of overlook the likes of the Toyota for the Porsche and the Audi, but in all honesty, that Toyota TS050 is fantastic. Now, let's talk about the hypercar. Is it still a good grinding car at Sardinia? Yes, that's a plus side. But in terms of its general performance, has it suffered when the physics update dropped? Yes, in all honesty, it doesn't feel as on rails as it did. However, it's probably much more realistic. I guess nobody would actually know apart from the people that have actually driven the hypercar in real life. But again, it's just not as good as it once was in terms of its overall performance. So that's going to be it from me today. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, turn your notifications on so you don't miss an upload from me. I upload GT7 and motorsport related content each and every day for your viewing pleasure. I hope you have a fantastic time. Enjoy watching the rest of Le Mans 2023. Peace.